Excellent. We've had some really interesting talks, and I'm sorry that I'm very, very bad at timekeeping. But I think it was really nice to hear what everyone had to say. I think probably first thing I would like to do is just open the floor slightly and ask if anyone has any burning questions from our three presenters from earlier on that they would just like to ask before we open up the discussion topics. Excellent. There are some questions coming, so I'll pass across to Anthea first of all, if I may.
Sorry, I keep sneaking in first, but always got burning questions.
Fast off the draw.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, a couple of questions for Alan, if that's okay. So, mind you, I would just like to say that I think all the speakers have been brilliant. It's really, really interesting. But Alan, particularly, the couple of things I want to pick up from you. The diagnostics test you mentioned, this is something we want to be working on at Bedfordshire. I'm interested about that, for nursing and engineering you mentioned, and others. What do you think is going to be the outcome from that? Have you got any particular plans? So after the diagnostic tests, what's going to happen next?
Right. So what we do, we've been running the diagnostic test for many years at Coventry. It's a shame that Duncan and Mark aren't on. Duncan, I don't know if Duncan's still here. Duncan was with us earlier, but he may have to have left the session because Duncan knows more about the maths diagnostic test than I do. But we've basically used it to sort of try and signpost those students that we think need help to actually come into the centre. So they will have been given sort of directions to say that we can help them improve their sort of underlying mathematical knowledge if only they can make use of Sigma, and that's what we're for. And that's been the main reason for doing that. Same with the nurses as well. That's been a sort of a more recent initiative, and that seems to have worked quite well. And in particular, Mark Hodds at Coventry, who's sadly not here today. He was on leave. He had planned to be here last week, but that couldn't happen, unfortunately. And Mark's taken to working quite closely with the nursing teams at Coventry, and that's proving very effective at getting those nursing students into the centre that really need to come and get the help from us. So it's identifying them at an early stage. And the psychology, that is mainly around the postgraduate psychologists, because their statistical background, their previous statistical learning in psychology, in statistics for those master students in psychology is so varied that it's often a bit late in the day when they realise they need some support with statistics. So that's why we've done that. But I've rather mumbled there. Sorry if I've not.
Thank you very much. Ina, you have a question.
Thank you. Also question to Alan. This is also about diagnostic test. I assume the diagnostic test is online test. Am I right?
It is. Yes, it's
yeah.
It is now. Sorry.
Yeah. Can I ask you which platform you are using for diagnostic test? This is Stack, Numbers.
No, it's a completely different system now that we're using. It's a shame that Mark's not here because he actually looks after the diagnostic test because we've moved over to a new system and the name of it escapes me. But if I may, I will when we finish talking, whilst other people are talking, I'll dig out the name and I'll post it in the chat for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. It was very interesting, and I should say the smiley faces idea for student feedback. It was a brilliant idea, and I think we need to use it, say, for our main events as well, because it's definitely increase the number of students who will give us some feedback.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's great for us as well because it's always nice to feel that you're wanted. And obviously it's nice to know if something's not been quite right for a student, and they don't always tell you. They won't always tell you face to face, and for them to write it down is sometimes easier. So that's equally beneficial to us.
Yeah, I just thinking about the figures about why we have a huge demand for online support, and just try to compare the situation in the Coventry University. It looks like the main advantage for your university is to have a good location for your mass support center, very visible location, and then students can use this in a more efficient way. In Brunel, we don't have anything like this. We have only one room, which we use for workshops and for drop-ins, and it is not, I should say, in very visible location in the library. We also have some location in the library, but probably students don't have opportunity to stay in this room if they need to stay and to work in teams and groups or ask questions if they struggle with some particular issues. And in this situation, probably we have what we have at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we realise we're very lucky.
Yeah.
We've got with what we've got, and I think the other side to it is that our university in particular were very adamant about a return to face-to-face learning back in September 21, and so staff and students were encouraged to come back to campus if they could. Staff were told that we had to be back on campus. We weren't given the option of doing it online back in the previous academic year to this one, and that's, I think, has had a continual knock-on effect of getting back to some sort of normality this year, in so much that there's very few students studying online apart from those that are studying online specific courses. So I think that's I think a factor in why we've seen such a dramatic return to in-person demand for support, plus the fact that we've got the centre that we have,
Yes, but at the same time, we also have the same situation at Brunel. Students encouraged to return to campus, and I have some students who just travel to the university to campus, and try to use our online support sessions from the library building.
Okay.
If they're not at home, they try to use being in campus online mass support.
That's an interesting concept, isn't it?
Yes, I was very surprised to hear, because some students just tried to send to me with a message. It's very easy to send a message by using Teams, and I am on a bus. I will be a bit late for your session.
I mean, it's interesting. What I think we've talked about sort of the differences between online and in-person support at other kind of sessions, haven't we? And the reasons why students might prefer it. And I think the anonymity and the kind of convenience are kind of two of those things. So clearly it's convenient. They haven't got to move away from their seat in the library. If they're able to talk to you, they can just sort of call you up and speak to you there and then, and they've got to move their computer or books or anything.
Even I've got some session with say 2 students, 1 student book, and then just ask me if it's possible, if another one just join our session. Okay, it's possible, but it looks like a group which really of students who are looking for our support.
It's one thing to point out, actually, which I didn't say, is that the students seeking online support still are predominantly statistics queries. Very, very few maths queries are now coming online, and I guess that's partly because of because it's easier to offer support with statistics online, and in some ways it can even be easier online with stats, because if you want to be using software, you can kind of have that running on each other's computer. You can share screens one way, we can share screens the other way. So sometimes that's easier than trying to do it, face to face.
I think my colleague Noel has the same comments about statistics support. He also mentioned about these things.
So I mean, we're monitoring things. We're still trying to offer both in person and online. We offer very little online provision because we've pretty much gone back to we offer. I mean, we're lucky at Coventry in so much that we've got the centre we have, and we can open it 10 till 5 pretty much every day. And so we've gone back to that with a little bit of online at lunchtimes. We've done that sort of 12 till 2 is when we're offering online support, primarily because we think we want to offer online provision to some students that are maybe working, studying part-time, distance learning, and lunchtimes might be a slightly easier space to come and get help from us.
Yeah, but my surprise was that I offer face-to-face sessions during lunchtime. I mean, on campus, and in previous years it works quite well. I've got two options during lunchtime and later in the afternoon. I think it is after the students finish their studies, but most popular was lunchtime. But now I just sitting in the room and waiting for students. Nothing happens. We will see. Probably this is still some recovery period from pandemic to normal. But we need to continue to offer both options, like you mentioned. I completely agree with this. Thank you.
Okay.
Fabulous, thanks a lot. Thank you very much for those questions. Quite like to open the floor up to anyone that would like to make a comment, or if I've got a question that I'd like to see if anyone else can offer some advice on, or anything really about the two topics that we've got for discussion. Really, is there anyone that would like to say anything, have a comment, talk about anything? If we're hoping there will be some discussion, maybe we've all gone to sleep. While people are thinking about that, actually, Rob, I wanted to ask you a quick question, seeing as people are talking, and then you can add on your comment after that. You're doing lots of work about trying to build a community within Cardiff, and I think that's something that I want to talk to you about, because we're trying to build a community at our university as well. But do you think you'd have done this had it not been for the pandemic, or do you think there's that need arisen because of the pandemic?
I honestly think we would have done something of this type anyway, because pre-pandemic, as I said, we were already asking questions about general engagement and community. I think we had already started looking at that. I think what the pandemic did is kind of push that forward more than anything else. It really made some of those things stark, I would say, like it has done in numerous areas. So whether we would have given it as much emphasis, I don't know, but we were certainly having those conversations before the pandemic, and the university partnership group that I mentioned, that was started before the pandemic as well. So it was already kind of developing in that way. So there's the university study actually did have some quite interesting data around things that students were highlighting before the pandemic and during the pandemic as well. And again, it just shifted, all the results just shifted basically. So what I suppose what we're trying to do then is kind of shift that emphasis in lots of different ways. We are fully back on campus, and it did make me think that actually you know, we are making big assumptions about people returning to campus, and you know, so everything I mentioned was really around face-to-face activities as much as anything else. But that is certainly what our institution is focused on at the moment.
Fab. I think Alan might have a burning question, but you want to say what you were going to talk about first, Rob?
Well, I was going to ask some about math support, and if anyone had any experience of perhaps more formal environments versus informal, and we've talked a lot about online and in person. But as I mentioned earlier, with our shift of building and a location for many of our math support sessions, most of what we have, if not all of what we have now, is that kind of informal environment. Sofas and, outside a classroom, relaxed, no boards, so it is quite different. We've adapted, tutors have tablets that they can work on with other students and things, but it is a very different environment to lots of people in a hustle bustle in a room and things like that. And I was just wondering if anyone had any experience or comparisons between those kind of environments, I suppose.
The only thing I can think of, Rob, is I mean, it's a shame there's Peter or someone from Sheffield Hallam's not here. I mean, they could speak about. You've seen their centre, haven't you? Their space. So I don't know whether or not they've experienced anything or not, but it's just a thought.
Like I said, I think it was really interesting to hear about the things around advertising that Holly mentioned, because we put more into advertising than ever in what we've been doing. So maybe we need to just fine tune some of that, not just advertise, but think about, targeting different audiences in different ways and things as well. But yeah, since the pandemic, it seems like everything we had previously established has changed. So really trying to pinpoint, how we can what's working and what's not is quite a challenge for us, at least at the moment, because it's almost like starting again.
I was going to say,
sorry.
I was going to say one of the things that made me wonder actually was with the different types of spaces, because obviously you're quite a public space. You say you're outside a classroom, so people are coming and going. That makes it quite a visible presence that there are people there accessing help, and there's still can be that stigmatism about it, can't there, as well? So not only is there the physical issues about not having blackboards and spaces to write things and stuff, but there's that stigmatism, isn't there, about if you're there sat with a member of staff, then you're obviously getting additional support, and maybe that some people's anxieties just can't overcome that. But equally, then there's the anxiety of having to go off into a special room almost and create it as well. So if it looks like you're sat there having a cup of coffee, is that less anxiety building or more anxiety building?
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I was kind of asking around, really. When we were in our old building and we had our room, you could see people hovering outside sometimes, and you could quite easily go over and say, "Oh, is everything okay? Are you looking for some support or something like that?" It's a little bit more difficult because in the current spaces, because people are just wandering back and forth. You can't speak to everyone that wanders past. This one of the spaces in our student centre for the Centre for Student Life is next to a 500-seater lecture theatre. So you can't canvass everyone that's coming in and out of there in the same way. But yeah, I agree. It's just not knowing, I suppose, at the moment.
I guess it's helpful. I guess that's when having a small room becomes a bit of an issue for some students, doesn't it? Because of that stigmatism. Whereas if it's a large room and it's a space where other students are working anyway, and there just happens to be other students in there getting help from staff, and other students are getting on with work together, it makes that easier. But that's not always possible, and I know space is a premium in many institutions, isn't it?
Yeah, even in our new building, trying to get a space of that, flexible space, if you like, on a regular basis is, well, we can't do it. That's why we haven't got one.
Yeah, I mean, and I know some colleagues have to actually physically book a room, don't they, to run a maths or stat support session. So
Yeah, that's it.
That doesn't help. But it was interesting your talk today, Rob, because Coventry, we don't have a maths community space as such for the students that are on the maths degree undergraduate courses. But we have a room that has notionally become known as the maths lab. There are no computers in it, just a blackboard, and I think it's the presence of the blackboard that lent its name to becoming the maths lab. And I think that's been given over. I think the university have said that the maths students can have it as their kind of social space. That's going to be a social and a learning space. So the students have been invited. They're running a competition now. The student reps are running a competition to redesign the room. So I'm certainly interested in anything that you find out in terms of how you might best design that space. So it's got to be a space that works in a kind of a sort of an informal social space, but it also lends itself to more formal studying and more formal kind of classes as well. Not necessarily lectures, but I think tutorials, seminars, maybe.
It's interesting, in a new building. Obviously, there's a whole host of informal spaces, so students can work, in different corridors individually. There's tables and chairs, and in all these different spaces as well, so you can work together. And that's all over the space. There isn't necessarily a communal space, which is quite interesting. And in a recent talk, I meant to mention this earlier, from I went to from another institution, they mentioned about opening up the kind of staff room, if you like, if you want to call it that, to students, just as a kind of, again, of another shared space, sometimes for students to go and warm something in a microwave, or something as simple as that, and how it changed, again, just change the dynamic slightly. They didn't have a huge cohort of students to be able to do that, but I think that was something. I've seen some of the work around students designing their own spaces in buildings as well, and I can't remember which one. I'll see if I can find it for you, Alan, but I know in one of these spaces, students ended up with fake grass on the walls. I don't know why, but that's what they wanted. So I think if you do open up spaces, I think it's great to give students opportunity to think about what they would like in such a space, and again, give them that ownership, like I was mentioning. But you might be surprised with what they come up with sometimes.
Is anyone else would like to make any more comments or anything?
Well, one thing I was going to say, sorry, I had my hand up earlier. Yeah, it was something that Rob mentioned that kind of alerted me to something that came up earlier. I think one of the issues that we're kind of that's there for us is student attendance. I don't know what other institutions' experience is like, but at Coventry, attendance levels are not back up to what they were pre-pandemic. I think there's a different kind of expectation, I think, on students. I think more students now think that it's okay to study sort of, if you like, by just not attending classes and just relying on the material that's uploaded to the VLE or whatever. And I think it's partly because a lot of material, I think staff and there's a greater sort of, I think there's quite a lot of material now that staff have got recorded, videos and stuff like that. So that's, staff have often got video recordings, maybe not of this year's lecture, but of a previous year's version. the lecture, and they're all on the VLE, and all the learning materials are on there. We can't necessarily convince all students that it's not quite as good a learning experience as actually being there physically in the classroom, and I think that's one thing we're battling with, and I think that's having an impact on the numbers of students that are seeking physical sort of face-to-face help in maths and stats support centres as well as in classrooms.
You want to come back on that, Rob?
I only say that I pretty much agree with all of that, and we're seeing that, and I think that's where we originally were coming from pre-pandemic around engagement. We were noticing attendance was dropping. I think it's fair to say that, you know, attendance is just a form of engaging. In fact, it doesn't necessarily mean they're engaged just because they're sitting in a room, but it's a thing that you can capture as part of that. But it perhaps does indicate a change for a number of students in how they approach their learning, and I think some have adapted to that. I think some perhaps are struggling with that. They can see it as perhaps being flexible, but perhaps struggling to know what that means, because it's not the same to watch a whole host of videos over a weekend. It's not watching Netflix, you know, or catching up a series on Netflix, compared to watching, I don't know, many hours of analysis back to back. It's very different, and so trying to kind of understand more about that, I suppose, is what is really key. One thing I mentioned about the flipped learning that we've done, whilst students who didn't or perhaps struggled more with that approach, most of those comments were around, or it's because you're not teaching me. Well, you're leaving it up to me to learn, which is not the case as far as I'm concerned. But the other side of that is that actually all the resources around notes, videos, everything else, exercises, is still available to students, just pretty much in the same way as it was before. It's just now on a video or on paper, as opposed to you get that from the lecture. So there's actually more, but if you want to engage in that way, it's still available. And I think that's okay, because ultimately the people do approach things in different ways. But it's the kind of recognition of that sometimes, certainly from a support perspective. I think that is a kind of perhaps something we have to try and think around. Whilst we are encouraging people back in on campus, that actually they may be looking for other resources to supplement their learning more than they have done in the past. And that's seeing this kind of drop in numbers, potentially. Again, I don't know.
Thanks. There were a couple of hands that went up again. So Anthea, have you got some comments?
Yeah, mine was more related to picking up this increasing engagement in all forms of support. It's just that we had noticed this year, obviously, a drop in number of people accessing our services. So what me and my colleague and I, Azra Khan and myself, we're just over a 1 FTE, and we overlap on a Wednesday. So what we've been trying to do is on the Wednesday, we pop round for as many classes scheduled there. If they're not on Wednesday, we go to others, and we actually visit classes face to face. We pre-arrange it with academics, just say we'd just like to pop in 5 minutes. So particularly those courses and units where we would generally see a lot of students coming to see us. So go in, introduce ourselves, or if, you know, second or third year students, remind them that we're still here. And that often helps when they see our faces and they go, oh yeah, we remember you. And the academic there is also reinforcing why it's great to make use of our services over in the study hub. So that has been helpful at just generating some more interest again, actually coming along to our drop-ins or asking for appointments. So it's a bit of work, but it's good for us actually to go out and see the face again. I think, you know, when you appear in front of them, they suddenly sort of think, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that would be really great. So that's been helpful for us, I think.
Fabulous, thanks a lot. We're just on 4:30, but Leslie did have her hand up. So do you want to say
it was
something,
just
Leslie?
it's kind of related to engagement. I mean, obviously,
Mm.
we're seeing a big increase in appointments, but I've noted that 15% roughly of students either contact us in the morning and say, I'm sorry, I can't make it, or just don't turn up at all. And, you know, kind of wondering what's going on in their heads that they think it's okay to do that. I mean, if it's genuine, some of them are, and I'm not feeling well today, well, that's fair enough, at least they've bothered to tell us. But the ones, you know, the 10% that just don't show up at all, and, you know, it's just kind of concerned really, because, you know, we're trying to raise engagement and manage increasing demand, but then appointments are going to waste. So I just wondered if anybody else has had that experience. That's all, really.
Yes, sometimes students just book an appointment, and then if they know that they need to cancel an appointment if they are not going to use it, they just keep it and that's it. And I just waiting for them for usually 20 minutes online. And but you see, in our service, we try to contact students if they missed a couple of appointments, and just try to say that it is not acceptable, and remind them that it should be they should cancel appointment if they are not going to use it, because we have a queue of students and another student may need this urgently.
I'm going to say as well on this, we find very similar often. I think students tend to book what I consider an aspirational tutorial, where they have a piece of work that they need to do that they're not really very sure on. So they set a tutorial for like next week, giving themselves a week to do some work on it, and then see us afterwards after they've done that work. It comes to the day they realise they've not done any of the work and they just sort of hide away afterwards. We get that in statistics and in our academic skills as well. Quite a lot, where students say, sorry, I haven't actually finished this piece of work that I plan to have done by today. So we get a lot of those kind of tutorials as a time management technique, I suppose, as well.
I was going to ask Leslie if do you know how long in advance are the students allowed to book appointments, and is there anything to suggest that it's the students that have booked further in advance that are just not turning up?
Our system is that you know, they send, we get a request from them and then we deal with the request. So usually there's a little bit of negotiation on agreeing a time. With maths, we can usually get them in within the week. Study skills, sometimes it's going to 2 weeks. But sometimes we're so busy, we don't have a time for a discussion. So they give us a list and I just pick a time on there. But we do, when we send the confirmation, please let us know. If you can't make this, let us know. We'll look at another time. They get a reminder email automatically that 24 hours before their appointment to remind them, and it contains, if you can no longer attend this appointment, please contact us, because at least 24 hours you've got a chance of maybe fitting somebody else in. And still we're getting about 10% just not showing up, and another 5% who email us in the morning going, can't make it today. But at least, you know, that, as long as it doesn't happen frequently. But yeah, you know, so they're not booking themselves on, and I'm quite nervous about them booking themselves on, because that's the way that we're kind of probably going to go, is we're going to have a self-booking system. And I'd be interested to see then if they're choosing their own time, whether that's better or worse. I just don't know.
Yeah, we have a self-booking system, so you know, students have chosen the time from what's available.
Yeah, no. So I would say our system is they tell us when they're available, and then we find a time to fit them. But
Anyway, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to draw this conversation to a close. I do apologise. It's well gone 4:30 now, unfortunately. I think it's been a really interesting afternoon, and thank you so much again to all of our presenters. I think it's so interesting to see how so many of us are faced with the same issues and are working on the same problems, and you're all coming up with really innovative solutions as to how to try and overcome those issues. And I think it's a conversation that will be long ongoing for many years still to come about how all our support is changing and how we can best work with our students. So like I said, once again, many thanks to everyone, and many thanks to everyone for turning up, and I hope you found it interesting. And we hope to see you again at an event soon.
Thanks, Sue and Andrew as well. Thank you both for organising it. It's been excellent. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.